What we're going to talk about today is the importance of protecting our nature, our environment. And let me give you a bit background. Last August 2014, here in British Columbia, there was the little publicized Mount Polly disaster. It's near the Caribou region near Quesnel. And what happened was there was a tailings pond. This was the pond containing the waste from mining, extracting gold and copper in the Caribou area. And the dam breach. It released tons of water, millions of tons of water, wastewater or tailings as they're called, heavy with toxic metals and a pollutant basically. So that is something that was a flag in terms of how mining companies are becoming or less responsible, maybe, if you could say it that way, when it comes to making sure that these tailing ponds do not breach. Today we have a guest from the Philippines. His name is Father Edwin Gariguez, who similarly encountered a mining misbehavior in the Philippines, and some of them are Canadian mining companies. Let me just give you a sort of like 101 on what tailings are. When you mine for minerals like gold, silver, copper, or nickel, to name a few, you need to go to a place where you normally chip up those huge boulders of rock, and you have to pulverize those rock in order to get the ore. The ore is a piece of the rock which contains the minerals. And usually the minerals are only a small percentile, let's say 1% on the average of that ore. So there's 99% goes to waste. And in order to get this 1% mineral in that ore, you have to pulverize the ore and to really find particles and to separate the minerals from the rest of the ore, the unwanted portion, the uneconomic portion of the ore. There are two ways of doing it. Either you use water and gravity to separate the minerals from the unwanted part of the ore, or you could add chemicals to it. Now that you've extracted the minerals, what do you do with the rest? Okay, those have to be thrown somewhere, and you just can't throw it on a river or on a body of water, because it's going to pollute that body of water. So mining companies create what they call ponds or tailing ponds, where they have to dump these wastage. And these tailings are usually very fine, almost sand-like particles that can float if the wind is strong on air. And what's going to happen is that these tailings are, as I mentioned, dumped into these tailing ponds, but they have to be impounded, shielded by a dam. But sometimes those dams breach, okay, and the tailings spill, and that's when the environmental disaster happens. And there are many reasons why a dam would breach. Sometimes the mining company failed to study the geological structure properly, or sometimes there's some weather conditions that will happen that will put increased pressure on the tailing pond. So we have here today by phone Father Edwin Rodriguez, who is a priest from the Philippines and who received the Goldman Environmentalism Award way back in 2012. The Goldman Environmentalism Award is given to people who have sought to protect the environment or advocate for indigenous people's rights, or to make sure that ill-designed and ill-planned projects do not go any further. So Father Edu, as he is popularly called, is on the phone. Can you hear us, Father Edu?
Good morning, Joseph, and good morning to our listeners. I'm Father Edu Gariguez from the Philippines, and thank you so much for taking on this important issue: love for country, love for environment. This is a different kind of Valentine for us.
Okay. For the benefit of our listeners, Father Edu, can you tell us a bit background of yourself, where you grew up in the Philippines, and what made you take the priesthood?
I grew up in Quezon Province, and then I incarnated to the Apostolic Vicariate of Calapan, that's in Mindoro. I have been very involved in the church since I was a kid, and my mother was very religious, so that made me one candidate for priesthood. So in my early years, I was a sacristan. So that's how my vocation started. So I entered the seminary in high school and then in college, and so that's how I got into this vocation.
Okay, and you were ordained in 1993.
Yes, that's right.
And so you were assigned to the island of Mindoro Oriental, am I right?
Yeah, actually, I was the one who volunteered. Actually, I am supposed to serve my own diocese in Lucena. But because I had an exposure among the indigenous peoples, the Mangyans of Mindoro, they are the first peoples, as what you call here in Canada. So I volunteered to be of service to the diocese, to the Vicariate of Calapan, right after my ordination
So
in
you,
1993.
so you,
So I have been in Mindoro for a long time.
so you became a priest to the Mangyans, okay, which sort of like are like the First Nations here in Canada.
That's right, that's right.
And what did you see?
Actually, my work is on development. So part of my ministry as a priest is not only to say mass, but in the Philippines, you are also expected to do development work as part of the challenges, as part of your ministry of being a priest. So I'm into development work, and we are also trying to defend the land of the indigenous peoples and also to protect their rights. So that's more or less my what I have been doing for a long time since I was a priest. Since I was ordained a priest in 1993, serving the indigenous peoples
So,
or doing development work with them. But then suddenly the environmental concern cropped up because of the mining, the Mangyan communities were threatened by the coming of the mining companies way back in 1997. Actually, it was a Canadian mining company. It was later on sold to the Chinese, but originally it was a Canadian company. It was CREW, CREW, so CREW Minerals.
yes.
And it was a very urgent concern because mining company will, in a way, deprive the indigenous peoples of their right for their land. So the mining company covers thousands of hectares of land, and these are the lands of the indigenous peoples.
What were they What were they mining, Father Edu? What were they
Uh,
planning to mine at that time?
they are mining copper and it's nickel. No, sorry, it's nickel.
Nickel. Okay.
Nickel and
Just
copper.
for just for the benefit of our listeners, nickel is a very common metal that can be found in our own Canadian coins. Our Canadian coin, the $1 loonie, is 98% or close to that nickel. Okay. And
Yeah,
the loonie, the $2 coin, the ring at least is at least 91% nickel.
and compared to mining gold, it's a different process because you need to. They call it surface mining. You need to take out the surface land level of the land, and then it's really to uproot all the trees, and it's very very destructive because you're doing you're getting the top soil of the land, and it's very destructive because you need to denude the forest, and it will really affect the indigenous people because it's their land, and they do not know anything about mining. And if you take away the land from them, there's nothing that they can do. I mean, they live because of the land, and if you take away the land, they will die. So that's that's really very disturbing. That's why we needed to address the issue.
Now, Father Edu, here in British Columbia, the First Nations people are very active and vocal about protecting their land. In fact, there are several cases here where they are actually, contesting the rights of companies for pipes to run through their land because they are afraid of pipe leakage in the future and its environmental consequences. How come? Can you explain to us how come the Mangyans need help from a priest?
Because in the Philippines, as you know, we are very much involved not only on the spiritual needs of the people. We try to address the integral development that's part of our calling. So the church in the Philippines is also challenged to become Church of the Poor. So that's the part of the orientation that we have. After Vatican II, there was this renewal in the church, and this is also being experienced in the Church of the Philippines, that we are called not just to cater to the spiritual needs of the people, but also to be one with them in pursuing or protecting their rights and doing development work. For the church, we and particularly in the Philippines, where poverty is really prevalent, the experience of poverty is always there. We need to also get involved in the development advocacy. So we need to become Church of the Poor.
So you're giving
that's the reason why.
Yeah, you're giving a stronger voice to this group of indigenous people who otherwise will not be listened to. But through
right.
the Catholic Church, which plays a big role in the Philippine society, then they're given a chance to be heard. Now, tell us, the Canadian company started these plans. Did they actually started the mining?
Yes. Originally, it was a Canadian company. Then it was sold to a Norwegian. Now back to Canadian, and now back to the Chinese. So it's somewhat confusing. But there are many Canadian companies doing mining in the Philippines. Actually, in my data, as of now, we have around 9 mining companies, Canadian mining companies in the Philippines. And the sad thing about it is that you need to understand that Philippines is in an archipelago. We do not have vast land as what you have in Canada. So most of the lands in the Philippines are islands, small islands, and added to that, many of the minerals are located in the area of the indigenous peoples. In fact, I have a study saying that 71% actually of extractive activities proposed and ongoing are within the lands of the indigenous people. So the indigenous peoples are very much affected by this operation of the mining companies, and the survival of their communities are really threatened.
Now, you mentioned several islands, and one of the islands way back in 1996 that featured prominently in global news was the island of Marinduque, which is
That's right.
which is 170 kilometers south of the capital of Manila, the south of the capital Manila. Now, for the benefit again of our listeners, Marinduque was the location of a big mining company called Mark Copper, which is from the name itself, they were trying to mine for copper. Okay.
Yeah, it's Marinduque Copper, actually.
Yeah, and it was owned then by a Canadian company called Placer Dome.
Placer Dome.
Which was
actually,
based...
Placer Dome is Vancouver-based, I think.
It was. It has been acquired by Barrick Gold, another mining company which is based actually in Toronto. But Barrick Gold, which has acquired Placer Dome, still has an office in downtown Vancouver. Yeah,
that's so.
That's right. So for the benefit of our readers, in 1996, one of the world's worst mining disasters happened in the island of Marinduque. Again, it was similar to the August